report. And we have several items on here, and so we'll proceed with first up is a strategic plan update. Dr. Connolly, Karen Hamilton, and Beth Hodge. Welcome to our table.
Thank you. You're welcome. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Before we get started, I added a sheet to your seats there that we'll talk about in just a minute, and it'll be linked within this newsletter, or this at-a-glance document that we gave you as well.
So we want to be mindful of the time that we have for you this afternoon, and the last time Beth and I gave you a quarterly update, we were in some planning stages, and what you guys asked us for was meat. And then we moved to, remember we rotated the objective owners through and brought some principals and teachers in. So we want to just kind of revisit that and kind of level set where we are, because we've got some meat. Where's the meat? We have that now. So from this point forward, you'll be receiving a monthly update on the strategic plan that follows the format with what you received for this meeting today. And we're going to ask you some questions about how much more information you would like to receive, but you've had a chance to look at this. We're certainly not going to read it to you. We're just going to walk through some highlights of this and then kind of get some information from you guys about how much information and how you would like that information moving forward. So do you want to start with learning?
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll start with learning and teaching. It's the first part on your at-a-glance document. So what I provided for you here, where the first bullet says created a clear one-page overview for principals on learning and teaching. And we felt like in the future, when we have statements like that, we'll make sure we put a link to what that looks like, because that probably would have been interesting. If I were you, I would have wondered what that was. So what you have in your one-pager, they've created on one side, the side that just says learning and teaching, is an overview of the entire learning and teaching objective so that you can more clearly understand the components of it. And on the back, the Learning and Teaching 2016-17 is a little bit more deep dive of what's going to be happening in this current school year around professional learning, around different processes and things that will be taking place. So you now have that to be able to look into a little bit more. Principals did receive this at the principal meeting last month. And we wanted to make sure we highlighted that a major component that's happening within this learning and teaching objective is the kickoff of the professional learning plan that we've been talking about with regards to the learning and teaching principles. We're really excited that APs are getting ready to do their day one this week. So for the next 2 days, actually, they'll be all involved. All of our assistant principals will be involved in day-long professional learning, focused on the 4 major areas of learning and teaching. And then our central service administrators will all jump into that, and coordinating teachers, which is also another really exciting element, that we're going to be able to provide that same professional learning for all of those groups of people, so we have the same message going out. Another really exciting thing that we did, we put a note here. Brian said we delivered an Ignite at the Ed Leader 21 conference, and we're glad to share a rough copy of that 5-minute presentation with you if you'd like to see it. But that was an overview of where we're headed this year with the learning and teaching objective. I think I covered some major things that are coming up, and then you can see some of the other elements that are happening with the RFPs and the curriculum strategy that's also been talked about here. So do you all have, as you have read over that, any questions around what's going on with learning and teaching? Or thoughts?
So just to piggyback on what Beth has indicated, one of the things that we want you to see as you go through this document, we're talking that this work is systemic. So you're going to see themes from learning and teaching that are going to repeat in achievement. They're going to repeat in human capital. So when we last met with you, we had these objective areas. What we have now is this framework of a strategic initiative that is fleshing out, and as it fleshes out, it interconnects with other sections. So the plan is the plan. not these isolated objectives, which is where we were when we initially talked to you about this. So the next section that we want to talk about is balanced assessment. And I just want to lead with, this is just really, really hard work. There are assessments that are required by the state. There are assessments that we provide. And there's good information that comes out of things that we're seeking and things that we want to build. So as we're looking at what comes off of that assessment plate, we're looking at how do we look at performance-based initiatives, how do we measure children's knowledge in non-conventional ways, and how do we make that plate so that it works with what's required and what's desired by us as we look to children as 21st century learners. The information that we have in there is really how do we get the work that we're doing out to schools. They're developing webinars around that. We're looking to have a performance task force pilot that will include 100 to 125 students with that. And again, we're still continuing to move the work of the 4 Cs and rubrics and that 4C toolbox out to schools. And all of that work and balance assessment also has its buckets, just like learning and teaching does, and how that work interfaces together around balanced assessment circles back to learning and teaching. So what it is that we're providing to children in the form of instruction and learning, we need to figure out how to measure that in a very balanced way. So we are going to pause after our quick chat about each objective because we know you've had an opportunity to look at this, but to see if you have questions now about balanced assessment.
I don't know, but I wish it was required watching for a TED Talks that Bill sent out this week about teaching for mastery, not
Great.
test taking. Yes.
Well, in that, you say you're going to have 125 students participating in some kind of performance assess. How will those students be chosen?
So Brad, who can jump in at any time, is working with the selection of that, and I think we're using Ed Leader, the organization that we're working with, to look at what those assessments would be, and then contacting schools that would be interested in that. I saw him come in.
Right.
Isn't Powell one of the schools?
Powell is one of them, but we're going to have at least a dozen others. We've got 18 tasks that are going to be piloted. We're looking to pilot them with a critical mass of students representing the range of performance and the range of geography of the county to sort of see how they work in different environments to be able to push them back out to schools for use in future years in a way that they've been piloted with kind of a good cross-section of kids across the district from different schools, different groups.
I'm sorry, piloting questions about assessment or?
No, they're little
Assessments
performance-based units that have tasks at the end that measure content as well as measuring the 4 Cs that our teachers developed last summer. We brought in a group of teachers to create these tasks and worked with an external vendor to help sort of polish them up and we're piloting them this year.
I see.
I think we ran a video of a 6th grade science class with earthquake zones, and
Right.
they were working on, that was an example of one.
And would that be able to replace some of the state required assessments? Perhaps?
Well,
Through E
it's-
ESSA?
It's more of an instructional tool than it is an
Gotcha,
assessment.
got it.
It would lead to the final whatevers, both ours and the state's. We hope it can cover both.
Christine, was that your question, or did you have another?
That's it for now, thank you.
Anybody else?
I just have one, just for clarification. Under balanced assessment, work accomplished for the last monthly cycle. Okay. The third thing, development of webinars to keep school level and central stakeholders.
Informed. We caught that before we came over, and we were counting on the fact that perhaps you wouldn't.
At least you wouldn't call it to our attention.
Well, it's a social studies teacher in me, I get it all right. Right, Dr. Lee?
Yes, ma'am. Good catch.
So it'll be fixed by this afternoon.
That's right.
Under work accomplished.
I figured that was what it was.
Word was it? Last word.
Other questions, or ready to move on?
Well, I'm excited about the trauma-informed care in schools and looking at strategies for that. That's exciting work.
So jumping right with Ms. Kushner into achievement.
Oh, sorry, I was looking
So
at perfect. All right.
It's
I didn't
even
mean-
better than a
I didn't
segue.
mean
She's
that we were
leading it,
leaving this
so-
topic, just that subsection.
So remember achievement when we were originally talking about was kind of a chicken and an egg. What's learning and teaching, what's achievement? There's a lot of equity work within achievement, and how does that work move forward, and how does it happen in conjunction with what's happening in learning and teaching? And that work is getting a deep foothold. And as you can see, we're looking at a cross-section of how do we look at equitable opportunities for education. So we've looked, the first bullet talks about initiatives around AIG. We're talking about tiered models of support for addressing student behavior, and right below that you see we're already talking about preschool children. We're talking about itty-bitty children and how do we socialize kids who have not been socialized to schools. And then another level for how we would provide more intense help around that would be trauma-informed schools. So not every child would need deep trauma work, but we certainly want teachers to be aware in the culture of the school that they're working in that lots of kids present themselves, and what might look like misbehavior certainly manifests itself in different ways. We're also doing work when you look at work plan for the next monthly cycle. We're really gearing up for Ready to Learn centers around our elementary support model schools, and how that deep work will work hand in hand with the work of learning and teaching. If you remember, one of the prongs of learning and teaching is social-emotional, and the development of schools and cultures around that. So all that work weaves together so that we're moving this framework of a strategic plan forward.
Additional questions on this particular area?
All right. So I think Human Capital actually may have had some of the last work in front of you, the most recent strategic plan work, because you worked with them last month on the pathways process and the legislation, and the decisions that you made are helping them continue to move forward in kind of a more flexible way. So that's been their major work. Now they're going to jump into creating focus groups and getting more information from our principals and teachers. We've already gathered quite a bit from those folks, but they're going to do some more intense focus groups around that. That's with this FAQ where they talk about begin planning an FAQ for principals and teachers. That's what that's going to be. All of those focus groups will be used to feed that FAQ to really help inform people about making sure that they're answering the right questions for all of those groups of people around our pathways. And they are going to continue to work with other departments. They've worked with our Office of Professional Learning. They've worked with the Learning and Teaching Objective to make sure that what they're designing in the pathways is really what we need as far as when we look at coaches. You know, we just had that discussion not long ago, and how does all of that work together?
Good.
So that's where we are with Human Capital right now. And they're continuing to work on the I Am Wake initiative as well.
So then that leads to community engagement, and this group is getting ready to take some deep dives into how does the Wake community and Wake County Public Schools really kind of circle into this community family. So the group has done some work about identifying what programs exist at schools, how schools may identify programs that they would want to be associated with, how they find out what's out there, how parents can become familiar with it. And they're also looking to replicate some successful programs from last year. But what I find to be the most exciting work is where we're looking at how do we do this work? How do we make Wake County Public Schools and every individual school within that a warm and welcoming place where families can come and join a school community, and the school community is relevant to families who are participating in that. And that's big work. That's big work in any district. It's really big work in a district as large as ours. That group is looking at some existing models that they can benchmark against and reflect against to see if we would like to incorporate this work. But as this work moves forward, that connectedness with how we participate in school becomes how do we, being families and the school system, participate in schools. That's going to be challenging. I think it's pretty darn exciting, and I'm looking to see how they're going to pull it off. So.
Questions or comments? Steve?
Well, I'll wait till the end. Are we at the end? I'll wait at the end. Sorry.
I don't know if this is where it fits or not, but Bill has initiated an email discussion about PTAs working together across our system. And schools that seem to have really successful PTAs working with schools that are struggling to maintain PTAs. Does that fit in here?
Wasn't just PTAs.
Yeah.
Right.
Sister schools.
Is there any place in this area for that to fit into, or?
I'm curious, it's PTAs and,
Well, I'm sorry I didn't send a copy you on the memo. The thought being that there are, if we look at the impact of poverty on the lives of children who wind up being concentrated in schools, and what that means for their life experience, their point of view, their exposure to things that cost money to do, perhaps even to own an instrument, those kinds of things. How might schools that would choose to partner with those schools to enhance those programs, not just buy a carton of copy paper,
sure.
but to actually impact the lives of the children in some positive way? And perhaps it could go the other way too in terms of cultural understanding and diversity. So that was the thought, and I would think it would fit under this umbrella in some positive way, but it probably wouldn't show up on any principal's list.
Sure. So, and we have some programs that, like the Crandon program that was referenced in here. I think that would be, I hope you do forward that. I think that would be great information, and Tim's nodding his head over there. We'd be happy to share that.
The boss just sent it to you.
Okay. Well,
And Jim Martin has begun sharing some ideas that fit into this, so
okay. That'd be great.
there's interest on our level to.
I had one other idea. We often go to the business community, the faith community, and it hit me, I don't know, I guess I was at the student assignment public meeting last week out in the Austin Ridge area. What about HOAs? I mean, has a school ever actually reached out to an HOA board to say, come learn about the school that serves your neighborhood? And maybe that's a way to approach the residential community. I'm not sure of any other one except individually, but maybe that's a way to build relationships with another quasi-governmental group that could influence between 30 and 3,000 homes, depending upon the community. Just an idea.
Oh, Tim?
Mr. Fletcher, the question of HOAs we have not discussed, but we have discussed and are discussing that question of PTAs working with each other. As you know, they have structural issues of their own. There are 176 individual nonprofits.
Sure, absolutely.
And the PTA council, which is we have individual PTA members as well as PTA council members as part of this community engagement group. And this is a conversation that's come up. I don't know exactly how the puzzle goes together, but it is a puzzle that we're working on.
And it's a piece that I introduced to Hardin last year, asking her to do, mostly because of Creature Barwell. So I'm glad to see it's moving forward.
And Bill said it came up in his BAC, and it actually came up in my BAC a couple of years ago, and I shared some information about wanting to know, my parents wanting to know how they could help
Right.
some of these other schools.
There's interest,
So
there's just a
there's
gap.
interest if we can just figure out how to
Make it productive.
put it together, and I had talked to Rodney Trice about it a little bit when he first came, so I'd just love to see us
Great.
try to figure out some ways we can match up folks that are interested in helping other folks across the county.
So we can't engage in this work without it changing our work. You can't roll this out and it stays on the path that you originally thought because we're doing things that we never really thought that we would do. So the last section that you see are impacts on district leadership, and we just wanted to list some brief opportunities for that. How the delivery of information and training to principals has completely been redefined in the past year. Principals' meetings have changed in how they're structured, and they've changed in how we're providing information to principals and development for how they are leading this work of the strategic plan. That's tied closely to the district-wide professional development plan and how all the branches of that are aligned to the same level of work around the strategic plan. We're working on combining district leadership teams, so when we're making decisions about strategic plan activities and actions, that larger group speaks with one voice, And we have attended the Ed Leader 21 conference for the second time, so we can keep those ideas about how districts are progressing in this fairly unusual work fresh in our minds, and then pick the brains of those people who are doing the work.
So we just wanted to, well, do you all have any last questions or thoughts before we wrap up?
I really appreciate the information you're sharing and the directions that we're moving in. My question would be, again, and I've asked it before, are we doing anything to check the pulse of our teachers and how they are responding, accepting, understanding, comprehending what this is really all about?
So we meet regularly with the Superintendent's Teacher Advisory Council, and they do keep us, that's a smaller group that does keep us regularly informed. But the learning and teaching folks have also started a series of focus groups. How many have you been able to do so far? Have you?
Outside of, we visited initially 20 schools that represented the diversity of our school system in all areas and all levels, to do teacher focus groups on their curriculum, leading to some of these pedagogical shifts that we're asking them to make. And then we're continuing to do specific focus groups. I've done 3 so far, and 1 at each level, and I have 3 more that are continuing to kind of drill down to really just asking questions about what they need in order to make these changes happen in their school. And really having that be as a driver, not just for the professional learning, but also more specifically as we decide to purchase comprehensive core types curriculum for either our English language arts or mathematics, that they really have a strong voice at the table in terms of it being something that they want and that they need.
So we're seeking that information for sure.
Okay, Jim?
So related to that issue, I appreciate the effort to provide the summaries. What I always struggle with is summaries have to be just that, summaries. And likewise with focus groups. We have to make decisions, but they're not necessarily, we don't always have the information that you sort of need at the classroom level, the focus group level. I understand that we as a board don't need and shouldn't necessarily have all of the everything of the focus group. But I also want to make sure that we don't get too filtered information. Because I feel sometimes in our presentations we get the good, and what we need for good decision making is the good, the bad, and the ugly. You need the whole spectrum so that you can make wise decisions. And so I don't know how to necessarily express it. As a board, we can't and should not have all of the nitty-gritty detail, but I feel like I don't always have the full spectrum that I need to make the wisest decisions, if that makes sense.
It does, and actually that leads us into the question we wanted to pose to you all is...
Ms. Kushner
oh,
also
I'm
has a
sorry.
question.
Yes.
Well, I was going to also thank you for the work, and I'm excited about the fact that the learning and teaching aspects are going to be part of, just be infused, because when we think about, all of us are on this board because we believe the Wake County Public Schools are the way to educate every child in this county and to be inclusive. And now with all the myriad of choices parents have, we need to make sure that we are the choice for parents, and that's going to come when we change our culture, and that we are the place for the most exciting educational experience for all the kids. And that's with the project-based learning, with the exciting things y'all are talking about in academics, when we expand our thoughts of AIG education, when we expand what we do in special education with our athletics, with all of the richness of our curriculum. That's what's going to happen with this change, and that's what's exciting to me, and that's what I would want to learn from. And I agree with Dr. Martin that we need to hear the full breadth of what's going on so that we can help you all make this change of culture and make our schools even more exciting. That's just my...
That leads into your question then, for us.
So when we think about this format of information and the kinds of the ways that you received information in this past year, we would like to be able to provide you with the best information in the way that you would like to see it and hear it. And so we would just like to hear a little bit about that. We are set and scheduled to be able to go through objective by objective like we did last year, but we wanted to know what you all preferred and what you need.
Anybody? And you want a work session or a student achievement committee?
So one of the things that would be helpful for us is to understand how you would like to have information and where you would like to have information. So when we went objective by objective, that's great. That's deep, and that's pretty much an afternoon commitment for each objective. And we're happy to do that again. I don't know how frequently you want that level of detail. You're going to receive monthly updates, but I'm also hearing, that just presents how we're moving the work forward. It's not talking about where we view gaps or barriers. So we need help from you guys to figure out how to best provide you with what you need.
Thoughts?
Well, again, I don't have magic answers, but hearing the gaps, hearing the challenges, hearing the frustrations helps make better decisions. Where I probably find the most utility is actually an interdisciplinary systems approach. So for example, when we're talking about the discipline issues, that deals with community engagement, that deals with academic achievement, that deals with teaching and learning. It's cross-cutting. And so for me, it's when we're focused on work, we need to make sure that the board is focused on work. When we're focused on work, I need that systemic information to help make sure that the work is going where it needs to go. I personally need that more than I need the update on each bullet of the strategic plan.
Well, how it all integrates and coordinates to accomplish our plan is what you're saying.
Well, we're interested in
Take a
accomplishing the whole
particular-
plan,
right,
yes,
right.
but we're going to focus, the work we need to do, some is whole system-wide, but some is a specific topic. Maybe it's arts education, maybe it's the discipline issues, maybe it's transportation. I mean, transportation actually impacts all of these areas, for example. And so I guess that's what I'm talking about, is moving away from topical thinking to systems thinking.
I think we have to do both.
We have to, no, I'm not disagreeing.
I very much appreciate this report. But I understand if we're going to have a
Right.
discussion about, okay, now let's take a new look at we've had success in moving toward a different discipline culture. What has been done and where are the gaps? What do we need to do next? Or what do we think, or what are the problems that haven't been solved as of yet? Now, I don't know if that's board level work or if that's work we ask staff to do and bring us a synopsis of that work. So I'm not
Right.
sure where that boundary is between board and staff in that.
Well, and that's what I'm
analysis.
trying to express. I'm not saying that we need every little detail, but it can't be too filtered, but it
Right.
can't be too raw.
Well, I will say this board is not afraid of negative data.
Right.
Of shortfall data. We just,
I guess the only thing I would add, so for me, I do like seeing the bullets, but that's not what I want you to present to me. I can look at that. I think it's a little bit of probably what both Bill and Jim are saying is, for me, I actually want to hear what you're doing. So, so for me, I'm like, oh, so tell me what these focus groups look like and what you're finding out around trauma-informed implementation at schools. So it's more about what the current, all the work that you're doing, what's the current application, what's the lessons learned, because that tells me as a board member where our decision-making lies. Because we're able to hear from you across the entire strategic plan, what you've implemented, what lessons you've learned. Because we may say, hey, these things sound interesting, but our focus is this, so can you put some emphasis here? And right now it feels, to me, I'm like, oh, it feels very much 35,000 foot view, and I have no idea what you're doing on the ground. Right? I mean, I hear a little bit of what you're doing in these bullet points, but it's still a little bit 10,000 viewish for us. And so I guess for me, there are clearly some things that are important as transportation, arts education, school discipline, which again, I think they cross the entire strat plan, but because I don't know what the implementation looks like, and I don't need to know every detail, that's not what I don't think any of us are asking, but I do think you can give it to us in a way to say, here's what's implemented, here's our lessons learned thus far, and then here's what we're thinking. Because we're not gonna do the job for you either, I'm not. But I do think that those inform what we need to do as a board.
So I'll just, to follow up on what Monica said, I'm not sure if we ask each board member to define trauma, what is the word you use?
That's my point.
Trauma,
Inform,
that we would have a common understanding of that. Very similar to what is creativity and how do we measure it. So their
So that's
concept.
why I called it a 30,000
Yeah,
foot
the
view.
concepts that we need to come to a common understanding of. That's not necessarily tangential to the conversation, but necessary for all of us to be on the same page.
That's exactly my point. Like, we're technically trying to make decisions at a 35,000 foot view without knowing what the 9 of us even know, and nor do we know what you really mean. So I think we're all making some assumptions based on context or our own personal connections to some of these things, but as a board, we are not operating from the same place.
It's great to hear that.
So, I hate to do this, one final question, and then we need to
Okay.
move
Someone
on to other
else
things.
has
Christine?
Well, someone else who hadn't spoken, I just wanted to echo that I also enjoy hearing what's going on in school, at the school level,
That's what I mean.
when you've had folks come in and actually demonstrate for us, because I want to know, what does that mean for human capital, a coordinating teacher, a coach, a literacy coach, an IRT, what does that mean for a school, and how do principals decide how to put
Boots on the
that
ground, what does it
forward?
look
So,
like?
yes.
And keeping in mind, what we're sharing with you today may change at our first meeting in December.
It very well could.
Okay?
Just a thought I had. What you want is more time.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
I'm sitting here thinking that
Good
what
good
y'all are
summary.
saying is
You're
we
absolutely
can
right.
try
Summary,
to-
sir.
That's my setup. We duplicate committee work again in work session. We're doing it today.
I think I said that at our last.
What if we, just think about it, and get back to me or whatever, what if we dedicated work session to strategic plan work?
Yeah.
And what got done in committee, that's where the work got done. Just a
And
thought.
yes,
It's a
and
way to
the
carve
addition is-
time and protect time, because what I'm hearing you say is this is the most important focus. I mean, if it's systemic and you see how everything fits, that may be a way to dedicate time to what you want and believe is the most important.
Yeah. I agree, and I think one of the things I actually said to Tom is, about committee meetings is, committees actually almost, and I said this to Tom, need a little bit of a holdup, because it doesn't help for us to do work in a committee that's actually not dedicated to the nuts and bolts of the systemic change. And so for me, I feel like we need some of this, what is the boots on the ground looking like? What does implementation look like? What are lessons learned? And that drives our policy decision, our student, because maybe student achievement conversation looks very different if we hear from 5 schools, this is how the strat plan implementation looks in our school. Again, I'm using that example because I don't actually know if it drives our committee work, but in my opinion, from an operational perspective, that's what it should be doing. It should be also driving our committee work in a way that's directly related.
Didn't mean to blow the agenda, I just wanted to put that.
I agree with you.
As a different way to think about, maybe a way to capture time.
But we've got to recognize we're a complex organization.
Yes.
So there's not a one thing that we can do, right? We can't just focus on the strategic plan. There's some things we got to do, just keep the boat moving right now. And so we've got to
Balance.
find that balance, which every large organization does.
Yeah, but a big boat like this does mean that you should have a real clear plan about how you're doing your work
Yes.
Okay. All right.
for systemic change.
Any last comments on this particular item? Okay? All right.
Thank you so
all.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy, Brian, and Beth on Magnet Schools Assistance Program grant.
Thank you.
We're having a breakout.
Looks like we're still in our facilitator. Still in our facilitators.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I'm here with Ms. Moore and Dr. Cochran from Magnet and Curriculum Enhancement Programs. As you're all aware, last week at our Student Achievement Committee, We had an opportunity to provide the board an update on the last few MSAP cycles. Today, we're here to share more detail about the most recent MSAP cycle. And normally, as you were informed last week, there are traditionally 3 years in between all of our MSAP grant cycles, but due to the Every Student Succeeds Act, we have been prompted to participate in a cycle for MSAP grant funding that is actually a quick turnaround in this same school year. This next cycle will run from 2017 to 2022, which is 5 years versus the traditional 3 years. And we have, as a school system, the ability to tap into upwards of $15 million for some really innovative funding opportunities for schools that can use that. And today we're going to share with you the names of the proposed schools and the criteria that's necessary in order to meet funding criteria for those MSAP grant cycles. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cochran to take us through our presentation this afternoon.
Thanks. So over the years, this first slide, he's fixing it. Over the years, Wake County's received over $45 million from the Magnet Schools Assistance Program grant. This year, there'll be potentially $15 million, as Mr. Kingsley said, over 5 years. And you can also see the last school up there if you scroll. Yes. Carroll, Green, Foxmore, Square, and Pope that were in the last year of that funding cycle. So since 2012, we've added 11 new magnet schools. 5 of them were initiated by MSAP, the MSAP grant, and 6 were added locally. As we select schools for inclusion in an MSAP grant, we try to find a balance of adding new magnets and helping to rejuvenate existing magnets. These MSAP grant purposes include the Every Student Succeeds Act updates. Overall, some of the wording has changed, but the purposes remain the same. I'm not going to read the purposes, but I just wanted to draw your attention to purpose 1, 3, and 5 that talk about prevention of minority group isolation, promoting diversity, and increasing choices, and the ability to sustain magnet programs after the grant funding ends. They're the purposes most unique to magnet schools. The MSAP grant considerations, the official guidelines won't come out until the new year, but we need to start working with the schools to develop their new themes to write the grant. These grant considerations are based on what we know from past grants, and in particular last year's grant cycle that included some of these new considerations based on ESSA. The first consideration is reminding us that we can create new magnets or significantly revise a theme at an existing magnet. Number 2 is the biggest change from the previous MSAP grants because it adds socioeconomic integration and not just minority group isolation. The 4th consideration is ensuring that the schools that you pick do not negatively impact other schools. You don't want to pick a school that then is going to create minority group isolation at another school. Number 5 requires that you submit a voluntary desegregation plan. That's the only federal grant, I believe, that requires that. And that's also why the Office of Civil Rights has to review your grant if you make it past the competitive process. Number 6 requires that students are selected by some kind of lottery and not by academic standards. So we definitely fall within that. And number 7 is also a change from previous grants where interventions that are proposed in the grant must meet the evidence of promise standards.
Can you tell us what that is? What is that evidence of promise?
It means evidence going beyond theory that that's based on empirical basis.
So we would have to have research or evidence-based practices, something that has some backing behind it that's been tried, evaluated, measured somewhere to have shown the impact that we're saying we want to apply by instituting this programming as a part of the theme in the school. They're upping the ante, as they should.
So whenever we're looking to write schools into an MSAP grant, we have to make sure that they meet the MSAP purposes and considerations, but we also need to make sure that they meet our district board-adopted magnet principles. And so I'm not going to repeat them, but they're up there, very much in line with the MSAP principles. In eBoard, you have a copy of the chart that's up on the screen right now with the 4 schools that we're proposing for the grant. This is a chart that we use to show how the MSAP guidelines and the magnet principles and how all the schools meet those principles and magnet or MSAP considerations. And we'll talk about each individual school in a minute. On the chart you have, it has each individual school on there. The second chart is another chart that we use to determine if schools should be considered for magnetization, whether with a grant or locally. That's looking at the magnet principles and the board 6200 policy, and you have that in e-boards as well for each individual school.
It's a different number now.
Different number now.
Yeah, it's a different number now.
It's not 62. You mean the
No.
student assignment?
The student assignment,
Sorry.
right?
Yeah, I think it's
Something.
41, 42.
It is a new number.
Okay.
I'll get that.
Good.
Marvin, don't you know that off the top
I knew it and I just didn't say it. And I'm just
Johnson.
waiting for it to go, but of course,
It's
board, same as earlier.
of the- All right, it's in the 4 series. I know
It's in
that.
the
41,
Yeah, it is.
41, 4200, I think.
So, over the past several years, we've added 11 new magnet schools. There's a balance of creating new magnets and renewing and revitalizing existing magnets. So for this grant, we're only adding one new magnet, actually of a school that was demagnetized in 2008. So you can see that the new magnet school that we're proposing is Lincoln Heights Elementary School, and the 3 existing magnets that we're proposing to be revised are Bug Magnet Elementary, Millbrook Magnet Elementary, and Southeast Raleigh Magnet High School. And those 4 principals are here with us today over there, so I just wanted to draw your attention to that.
I wonder why you're joining us. Yeah.
4150.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel better now.
Well, off the tongue,
So it-
6,200.
So at Bug, magnet applications have significantly dropped over the last several years. There's room for magnet students with crowding at 84.4%, and free and reduced lunch is at 68.8% when the district average for elementary is 37.2%. And then 76.1% of the students are Black, and the elementary district average is 22.5%. And reading and math proficiency scores are below the district average. So those are reasons that we're looking at revising that theme. Lincoln Heights Elementary School, its actual crowding is 95.4%, but when their renovation is complete, they'll be closer to 70%, so there'll definitely be room to attract magnet students to that school. Free and reduced lunch, you can see, is significantly above the district average, as is the Black students and Hispanic students. And those are 2 key student groups in the grant. That's why I'm drawing attention to them. And reading and math proficiency scores are below the elementary district average.
I also think that, as we've talked before about Lincoln Heights and in the work from the board retreat last February, it's a school that's located in a community where there is tremendous opportunity to draw in from crowded schools that are right around it. So we think that that's really a pretty good match there.
So at Millbrook Elementary, magnet applications have significantly dropped over the last several years. Crowding is at 92.4%, so there's room for additional magnet students. Free and reduced lunch is above the district average, and Black students and Hispanic students are above the district average, and reading and math proficiency scores are below the district average. Magnet applications have dropped at Southeast Raleigh High School over the past several years. Crowding's at 82.3%, so there's room for more magnet students. Free and reduced lunch is well above the district average, and Black students and Hispanic students are above the district average. And math, biology, and English 2 proficiency scores are below the district average. So at this time, we want to get feedback from you about the schools we've proposed for the MSAP grant. So we have up there 3 groups that, and actually my team will go pull down, you'll see where you could go for that discussion. And then once you get in those groups, they'll explain the process. But we'll spend about 5 minutes on each school with you being able to give us plus Delta, any questions that you have about the schools.
Are we vertical or horizontal groups? Symmetric.
It's so funny because it was a great question, but I did not.
Why?
Because I was like, yeah, this is my group right now. I totally assume vertical. That's such a great question.
So I like columns and rows.
Maybe because I've been looking at my auditor with budgets on there, that's all I can think of. Makes my head hurt just a bit.
Or if you add down.
I grade papers.
I know.
You look for
You
it.
look everywhere, I know.
Things I can come up with in the
But it's
script.
interesting because generally I thought that because I'm usually vertical, I mean horizontal, but I think I look vertical because all day all I've been doing is looking at vertical. So we're going
Kevin and Ken.
Somebody
said this way.
Do we need our tablets?
Same time? In November 21st? Probably good, but I'll double check. I'll get back to
My group, I'm waiting on you. I told him, I'm waiting on my group. I know. I had time to
Mr. Hill.
It's also because I'm so, where's my group? And I was like, my group is
Are you comfortable? I'll do it. Are you comfortable?
So go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Wrap up.
So, when you take a look at our timeline and what's happening next, I wanted to go through a few things as we close up. So, we will need to bring, we're planning to bring to the board sometime in November the schools that we'd like to include in the next grant. As Beth said earlier, for this particular grant cycle, we are focusing on schools that need some renewing, rejuvenation that are existing magnets. That would be 3 of them, and then 1 new magnet that's technically remagnetizing. You know, I think there's ongoing work that's being done with the board and staff around the role of magnets in the community, and I think that needs to continue and so that we see, because we've added actually quite a few magnets in the last 5 years between local magnets and grant magnets. So, and then maybe do a longer range plan about what our expansion might look like, as well as supporting and making sure that our existing magnets are healthy. So what we would bring in November would be the slate of schools. I do want you to know for your reference that there are a number of other schools that we have considered. We pulled data on quite a few schools. And these schools best met both the focus that we have on trying to bolster our existing magnet program, as well as including a new one that we felt would have a really good draw area and a good chance of meeting the requirements that are in the magnet grant process. And a lot of the other ones that we looked at were either didn't have the same need or would have been brand new magnets. And again, we wanted to make sure that we are looking at our existing magnets as well, because we have the opportunity to do that. And for all of these schools, it's been quite a number of years since their magnet theme was last revisited. So we will bring sometime in November the slate of schools to include in the next magnet grant. And then in December, we want to involve the board in a discussion around what magnet themes might look like. And this will be a broad discussion. I don't even know that we'll tie them specifically to a school to begin with, but we may, just depends on what happens between now and then, but we want the board to give some feedback. And I think the questions and the plus and deltas that you talked about today can help inform how we structure what that feedback will look like based on what the big questions are and the themes that seem to recur from the different board groups that we're talking today. There seemed to be as much in the conversation column as there was in the plus or delta column. So I think that that'll help us format how we get feedback around themes next, because one of the things that seemed to be recurring everywhere was the importance of understanding what the theme really does for the school and what it does in combination with leadership or demand or staffing or any of those kinds of things, permeation around the entire school population as opposed to a small group within the school. So that seemed to be heavy on the minds of everyone as we walked around, so we'll be able to address that. Because 3 of the schools are existing magnets, they will continue to market for their magnet themes as they currently have through the next application process. For Lincoln Heights, which is a new magnet, what we are proposing when we include them in the magnet grant will be that their first year, which we won't know that whether or not we get the magnet grant until September of the year in which we are implementing these themes. But for Lincoln Heights, we would propose that would be a planning year, so that their actual first full year of recruitment and opening with a magnet theme will then be the following school year, which is 18-19, and it coincides with the opening of the new building as well. So we feel like that works really well together. So you see the rest of the timeline there around when they release the regulations. There's a lot of work that's done in a short period of time to get this together. And then, of course, we won't know until the end of September in the 2017 whether or not we've actually received the grant. I will say one additional piece around the timing of how we do this work. As you saw with the last magnet grant that we did not receive, we front load some things in a business case around the non-negotiables when we go into the magnet grant process. But one of the things that we're working on as a staff is being a little bit more intentional about pre-planning for how we address new magnet programs in schools or revised themes in the event that we don't get a magnet grant. So that'll be incorporated as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Chair Benton, can I ask a quick clarifying question? So given that Athens Drive and Reedy Creek are not going to be in this grant, does that mean they will be locally funded
Yes.
initiatives?
some of the positions were already built into a case last year that's gone on, so those positions are in place. And then for some of the training that's required, we have identified some local funding for this year that we can use to start that. But as always, when you don't get a magnet grant, you do have to scale back and distill because it's not $12 million.
Okay.
And I may have heard it wrong, but, so this magnet application period, they will be advertising for the current magnet themes. So that tell me that their themes would not be changing?
Well, I think what the community will know is what their current theme is, and that the school is submitting for a new magnet grant to revise its theme, but obviously not what that theme is.
Do you anticipate that that will have an impact on applications and people signing up for what they don't know what the heck's going to happen?
Yeah, I don't, so I think it's hard to tell.
Okay.
I think, and these schools are schools that in some cases have not had the number of applications we wanted in the past.
Right.
So we would like to think that advertising the refresh is an opportunity for families to maybe be more interested than they may have been otherwise. But we'll see what the numbers look like, obviously.
But this is where we're going to I think we need to be conscious of the history. We're not going to just wholesale throw everything out and start fresh.
All right.
We're going to be conscious of the history and move forward, I think, and that would probably be at least no less attractive, hopefully more attractive.
Anybody else? We look forward to seeing this move forward.
Thank you.
It would be interesting to see how our comments might have been collected had we gone horizontal instead of vertical.
You want to do that again, next work session?
No, but I just, it would have been interesting.
You burned it. Yep. All right. Tell us what we don't know, what we know.
Cord, I'll try it up here.
So today we're having a continuation of a discussion that started, I believe, in Student Achievement Committee last week around some questions specific to draft 2 of the enrollment plan. It's been, we've had an opportunity since we released draft 2 to have a number of community meetings out in the community and get some feedback. So we're going to just kind of walk through a little bit today where we are and see what questions the board have in preparation for when staff does present draft 3.
Okay, so we got feedback from 3 meetings that we'd like to report out to you. The Student Achievement Committee meeting, we had a public information session at Austin Ridge Elementary, as well as District 4, Mr. Sutton's BAC. So at the Student Achievement Committee meeting, just going back to, we tried to present draft 2 during the work session. It ended up going to the board meeting when we presented it and didn't have an opportunity to discuss some of the items that we would like to get feedback from the board on. So what we did at the Student Achievement Committee was we reviewed the recommendations from staff regarding draft 2. We reviewed and discussed the feedback with regards to reducing the crowding at Mills Park and as well as assigning those students to Hortons Creek. Specifically, we got feedback from Cary Park and Blackstone neighborhoods that we included Mike Miller on in the discussion at Student Achievement Committee with the board members that were present. And then we also reviewed and discussed the calendar option for Hortons Creek, which was one of the discussion points from that board meeting that we had brought up at that time. So the public information session at Austin Ridge, there were approximately 120 people who had attended. We got a good showing of people. It was a very good meeting. We answered a lot of questions. Kathy and Laura answered questions from participants who showed up, broke them up into groups. We had a large portion of the people who were there were from the Cary Park, Blackstone subdivisions, but we also had people there from the current Austin Ridge base attendance area, families from Sutherland who were also affected in the draft 2 proposal, as well as it was like 1 or 2 families from Riverbend area
that were there to get some feedback and some clarification. The board members that were present, and thank you for being there, we had Ms. Susan Evans, Mr. Bill Fletcher, Ms. Christine Kushner, and Dr. Jim Martin. So thank you for being there. A lot of the feedback was centered around several items, and I'll just go through some of those now just to bring you up to speed. There were some alternative assignments that these families had presented to us that they'd like to be considered to reduce the crowding at Mills Park. There were some discussions about M16 and the type of calendar that the school would operate on when it opens. There were questions surrounding the optimization engine that Mike Miller uses and how those factors were weighted when using that optimization engine. There were some comments about the impact on the child when we deal with student assignment and some of those family shared stories, individual stories from their families. There was feedback centered around growth, specifically how do we calculate growth. There were also discussions about the calendar option selection process and the priorities that are used during the calendar option application period, as well as aligning siblings on K-8 calendars, which is part of the priorities used in that selection process. There were questions about grandfathering, and we reviewed the rules and who can and who cannot grandfather. And then lastly, there was some discussion about the northern boundary of Hortons Creek Elementary. That's where the school is located, and how it's proximate to some of the homes in the southernmost neighborhoods of the Austin Ridge base attendance area. As I said, Laura and Kathy spent a great deal of time answering a lot of families' questions at that meeting. We also generated an FAQ that was put online. Lisa, that's online, correct? Still?
Yeah.
Yep. So we've answered a lot of questions through an FAQ that we were not able to answer at that meeting. We also answered specific family questions through email. We had asked families to put specific questions in an envelope. We took those back and staff answered those individually as well. We did want to give a huge thank you to Chris Brown, who facilitated the meeting. She did an absolute phenomenal job. So we want to thank her for that as well. And then the last item, we generally don't report out on BACs, but we did feel that we wanted to just bring you up to speed with regards to two of the items that came up at this particular meeting. At the District 4 BAC, we reviewed draft 1 and 2. We did receive feedback regarding the high concentrations of low-performing students of schools in the area that we wanted to share with you, as well as the members of the BAC voted on a resolution to establish a working group that would develop sound strategies and programs to address the needs of the students at Rogers Lane. So with that, I'm just going to open it up to you for any questions or comments.
Questions or comments? Ms. Evans?
Where to begin? I want to start by saying thank you so much to the staff for all their work so far. Well, you know, we are continuing to hear from these families from this one portion of the Cary Park HUD. I am going to make that note that Cary Park is not one neighborhood. It is a planned unit development that includes several neighborhoods. But we are hearing from the part of that HUD that sits north of the lake that divides the community and the Blackstone and Amberley neighborhood, with their fervent cries that they would like to remain at Mills Park Elementary School. And I shared an email with the board and staff members that I received from one of those members earlier this week. There's a few of them that have been in contact with me regularly, and they've done quite a bit of analysis with their own maps and so forth, and keep asking a few questions. So I would just like to ask if the staff could bring back a little more data around that particular area. First thing that I would like to have a rough sense about, first of all, is how many students currently live in those two areas and what the projected enrollment over the next 2 or 3 years would be in the elementary school for that portion of the Cary Park PUD that sits north of the lake in that Blackstone neighborhood, because I don't have a sense, you know, how many students we're talking about, so that would be helpful to me. You know, a rough estimate of what we think we're looking at over the next few years just from that particular area. And then one thing that I've been hearing a lot from this group, or some, is some expression that they feel like they've been moved a good bit, and I suppose they did have alternate different school assignments prior to the Mills Park School's opening, but it would be my understanding that this particular area has probably always been assigned to Mills Park Elementary since it did open, and y'all can verify that. And I believe the school opened in 2008, 2009, if my Bill's research.
The history.
Yeah, so, you know, and confirm whether or not they've had that stable assignment since that time. I believe they have.
They may have gone through a calendar conversion,
Yes, some of them did probably
but
go
not,
through the
but not
elementary
necessarily
school.
a reassignment.
That's a good point. Some of them would have gone through calendar conversion around that 2010 timeframe, I think.
Right.
For the elementary school only. So that would be
Kind of a
helpful.
calendar conversion,
Calendar
history
in.
would be helpful.
Yeah, what year that took place. I believe it was the year the middle school was going to open.
Yes.
But I just don't remember which year that was.
And we're talking K-8, so elementary and middle.
No, the middle school was not yet open. The elementary.
No, I mean with assignments and.
No, just elementary.
No, I'm just looking at
Elementary's the only
elementary
one on
right
the table.
now. Elementary's all we're really looking at this proposal, even though there's some implications
Yeah.
with the future middle school assignment that has been raised to me as well. Another area that this group of parents keeps raising is, you know, they're trying to find a solution for how we could keep their neighborhoods in the Mills Park base and yet help us relieve crowding in the Mills Park base. And so they have questioned a few times why some of the neighborhoods that sit to the south of the Mills Park School, and I think one that maybe is even newer than their area, is going to continue to be assigned to Mills Park, and they wanted to know why we couldn't consider assigning it to White Oak. So,
My only question would be, how does that reduce the population at Mills Park? Because
well,
they're at Mills Park too, is that,
yes, they're at Mills Park too. And I think they're referring to
how does that
this-
populate then Hortons Creek?
Yes, that's the question. So even if we were able to make that work, and I think they're referring, and help me if you know, this Bellwood neighborhood, is that the one they keep wanting to know why we can't assign it to White Oak?
Bellwood Manor, they're two
Bellwood,
different.
Bellwood Manor.
Bellwood Manor and,
Which, I'm not
The
saying we
question is
want to
Hortons
do
Creek.
that. I'm not saying we want to do that. I wanted to refresh my memory about when we defined the White Oak base last year, and I believe we just divided the previous Highcroft base when we made that decision. And my recollection was the reason that we didn't touch any of the Mills Park Elementary base with the White Oak opening was because the area that encompasses the former Highcroft base that really goes all the way down to Highway 64 in Apex was the area that includes really all the newer neighborhoods, many of which have yet to come on board.
In that context, if we could just have a map that includes
Map.
that assignment stuff, I think it just help extend the whole region. would be
And then
useful.
some of that timing on what we know about those neighborhoods that are coming on board in that most western, southern portion of this general geographic area, so just above 64. You know, because my question would be, and what I tried to explain to parents who stayed after the session that night asking me questions, was that my understanding was why we wouldn't want to move some of these other neighborhoods to White Oak is that we felt like in 2 to 3 years, if not sooner, White Oak would be full from the future neighborhoods that are in its base, and then that might lead to us having to reassign some of these families, and so I'd just like to have that all verified. and kind of know the time frame of how, I guess, maybe put it into a specific question. What the enrollment of White Oak is now, what we kind of anticipate the enrollment to be next year, the year after, and whether there's any room to consider anything these folks are asking us to look at in that regard.
Well, would add to that, it's not just White Oak this year, Hortons Creek next year, and then E50. So what I have heard the staff say they're trying to do is to minimize reassignments.
Absolutely.
Changes in assignments, we're trying to get stability for that corridor, and we have these 3 schools coming up, so if we could put together a narrative about these 3 schools over the 3 years, I think that will be helpful for us as a board to make the right decision.
One of the areas of confusion and concern at the public meeting was a lack of a good definition of what the database is on which these algorithms run and to bring things out. And so I'd really like to see us have a public document that clarifies, it's my understanding, that our database that's constructed and managed by NC State people is a comprehensive database of every parcel in Wake County, knowing what the property is built on that piece of land, how many bedrooms it has, what price range it's likely to sell for, and how many children, based on our past experience, it will generate, at what age. And I believe all that is built into the NC State database, but we were not able to share that effectively with parents at the meeting so they could better understand that when we say we're looking at 3 schools and how will Hortons Creek affect those 3 schools, it was much more robust in terms of the data that was being looked at and how it informs a decision than just simply, well, how can we shuffle kids between these 3 school buildings in order to deal with an apparent crowding issue.
Good point.
So I really think we can improve understanding in the community with a fairly complete but easy to understand document of how the database is constructed, including the timetable for collecting takedown data and that information, which NC State does for us every year.
And then one last item I just want to put out there that's not totally related to the other things I discussed, but is part of this area, is that it has been raised by some folks in this area that this apartment community, the Groves at Cary Park, that's currently assigned to Mills Park Elementary is being slotted to change to Hortons Creek. And I'm not certain it would be a bad situation, but I do know that community, and it is a
Affordable housing.
it is sustained housing, and those families do need a little bit more support. And I know that the Mills Park Elementary School has been very supportive of those students, and I think there could be some merit and stability for that little pocket of students, and would like to see us look closely at what the impact on numbers would be at actually retaining that Groves at Cary Park at Mills Park Elementary. But other than that, I just agree with your comments, Bill, that I think that we have a general sense of the basis on how this data is shaped into what the staff is proposing, but I don't think the public has as good a feeling
it's
about
not
it.
transparent at all.
And we've got to do better a job of helping them understand it. So I'd appreciate anything we can do with that.
Jim?
Yeah, so I share a number of the issues that you've raised, Susan. I particularly, too, was wondering, what's the total number of students? And I might have expanded it basically north of the lake and south of the Carpenter Fire Station Road. Just the total number in that we're talking about. I'm sympathetic. Having gone out and looked around the area, I'm sympathetic to the community's concerns that they've raised. And if I were able to just, in the ideal world, draw the boundary for this school, I would concur with the folks that I've been hearing, the Carpenter Fire Station and Mooresville Parkway. However, What that is ignoring is that we've got a number of schools and we've got landlocked locations. We've got the real landlocked location of Austin Ridge up in the corner. We can only draw a quarter. We only have a quarter draw area because of the airport and the county lines. Horton Creek, we only have a hemisphere. All of that, so the location of property, unfortunately, doesn't allow us to do the ideal. The model that I see right now uses 540 as a hard boundary. And I can make a very strong argument why 540 should be a hard boundary, and I think most of the families at the meeting were also talking about 540 being a hard boundary. Given that, we have to start up in the corner and work our way down, and that's what's given rise to this assignment. I guess my question is, if we would back away from our 540 as a hard boundary, what would that do? It's clearly going to impact the 50 issue that Ms. Kushner has raised. Some people were saying, well, can you use the Evans Farm to go to Hortons Creek to allow the others to stay in? And the problem there is then who populates Austin Ridge? So that doesn't work unless we have some ability to draw east of 540. I'm not saying I recommend it. I'd like to hear that conversation. What happens to the picture if we consider crossing 540? Because once a kid's on the bus, he can probably get underneath. So,
Well, and along that lines, that
Underneath
Cameron
540.
Cameron Pond neighborhood sits just behind the Mills Park area, which we're saying
Right.
may experience a change
Right.
in a couple of years to potentially Carpenter Village. They may well prefer to stay on this side of 55 and go into the other side, and is that feasible or not? So.
well, and that would be one option, but I think to that community, I think when we talked about it, it was pretty clear that it did make sense not to shift them right now, because with E50 they were going to be shifted. So I think there's commitment to not a shift more frequently than 3 years.
No, that's not
But
what I was referring to. I was
you're even
referring to
suggesting
hearing
they
from
might
some
go.
of these parents that perhaps the Cameron Pond, if we're worried about having enough population in Cameron Pond, in Hortons Creek, that maybe we should consider Cameron Pond to go to Hortons Creek. And I'm just voicing that question as well.
Well, so the point is, all of that can be on the table, I think, but to what degree should 540 be a hard boundary? The second question that I heard that is not directly related to this elementary school assignment, and yet it indirectly is, there was quite a number of folks who expressed concern of, I think, so a fifth grader, I think, could get shifted to Hortons Creek, then go to middle school at Mills Park Middle School for 6th grade, and then Austin Ridge Middle School opens up, and so they would then go to Austin Ridge Middle School. And so there was concern that you get 3 assignments in 3 years based on our current grandfathering model. And I'm sympathetic to that concern. So I wonder to what and I know we haven't fully mapped everything out, we don't know calendars and all that kind of stuff, but I wonder to what extent we could consider making a grandfathering exception for this strange scenario, because we're having a reassignment and 2 new schools opening all at the same time, and I think we would at minimum gain some goodwill, if not create some solutions, if we could basically say, no, you're not going to have to go to 3 schools in 3 years.
But wouldn't they be able to grandfather in 5th grade and not have to change? Is that not correct?
So I guess a fourth,
You started with 4th grade, yes.
Fourth and fifth.
But let me investigate.
But anyway.
Right.
I mean, let me map it out and see. Sometimes I have to write it out myself to see that pattern. Yeah.
part of the grandfathering issue to concern is transportation-related issues.
Yeah.
So you've got transportation, you've got multiple schools and so on. So like I say, because of the crazy growth in this area, I wonder if we couldn't, before we make this assignment decision, sort of give a little bit of, I mean, we can't do this promise for 10 years kind of thing, but possibly for that. So I think that would be a step that would have some positive feedback. Bill?
And I think one thing that I think will help is, because we're going to have to look at Austin Ridge Middle, M16, and what calendar will it be on? So to have some information about the elementary feeder strategy for Northwestern Wake would be very helpful. So if there are 3 or 4 elementaries that are feeding that need to feed to a year-round middle in order to provide calendar alignment, K-8, then what is that year-round middle, and does Austin Ridge fill that, or are we going to meet that need elsewhere?
And I would add to that, that there seems to be not as much demand for year-round middle, but is it because it's not proximate? So I don't know how we answer that question.
And with our 7-year plan, are we meeting the capacity of a multi-track?
Correct. I think that's an important.
Say that again?
With our 7-year building plan, are we needing the capacity?
Yes, we
of a
are.
multi-track?
He answered that question.
Okay.
Well, but in this, in the calendar discussion that we have, I would like to throw on the table, I hear from parents that year-round is more problematic at the middle school level than it is at the elementary school level.
I've heard both. I've heard some that like their middle school
Okay.
kids, but these are anecdotal.
Yeah.
I think going back to the survey,
Yeah.
might be
It's like
enlightening.
start times, it's very situational to the families.
So the
Yes.
question to throw on the table is, and we talked about the calendars a lot, but in our review, might we consider putting all middle schools on traditional, like we do our high schools, and let the year-round be an elementary school issue?
Well, now Pine Hollow
That-
filled
that-
up right away.
That is a broader subject than.
Yeah, that's not part of this.
That's not part of this
Not part of this.
conversation.
Didn't Pine Hollow
Okay.
fill up pretty quick?
Additional questions
And that was
about
just this year?
populating Hortons Creek. Have we given y'all enough
Well,
for your homework?
can
It's a good little list.
Well, I mean, the parents' concern is, don't send us, send somebody else. And they put on the table suggestions of what those other people might be without fully understanding what the impact would be on other schools or year 2 or year 3 of this plan as it continues to roll out. And that's what staff needs to share with us.
Because the narrative's not just White Oak,
Not
Hortons
just
Creek,
White Oak, Hortons Creek.
E50,
Right.
Hycroft, being
And we've
overcrowded,
got
Mills
very
Park.
overcrowded,
Right.
we got Carpenter and Cedar Fork,
Cedar
and
Fork's
those
been
schools
capped
that are
since the beginning.
overcrowded as well to be dealt with over the next 3 years.
Correct. So, and we need to look at that big picture.
Right.
Yes.
Do you have additional questions, Christine?
Well, I just had on the resolution on Rogers Lane. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well,
We just-
hold on, any
Okay.
more on
Oh,
Hortons Creek?
Okay.
Anything else on?
I think
I think we
Okay.
give them a
I
lot
think
more.
Ms. Evans gave a lot
All right.
of the community's questions, which I appreciated. Thank you.
All right, now to Rogers Lane.
Rogers Lane.
So I just, I mean, I don't know if you have any more to share about what, or if Mr. Sutton was there, if he can share about what the sort of will or intent or messaging of the group was, but I do have some thoughts about some things that staff are working on. So I don't know if you want to start by summarizing what the tenor was of the conversation.
That during the presentation of both drafts, I particularly showed the reading scores and achievement scores of both schools. That was concerned among the group about where that school, Rogers Lane, would obviously start off, and questions of whether or if it would start or come in as an elementary support model school, or what, given what the projected performance would be. Of course, in the BAC, there were a number of parents as well as principals and principals of elementary support model schools. And so the idea, I thought, was to have a working group that would talk about some of that and what might be the planned programming at Rogers Lane. It seemed as though the feeling that it should not come in as an elementary support model school and have the opportunity to prove itself, for lack of a better word, if you will, but not ignoring the fact in terms of the data and what's there in terms of projecting the students that are coming in, and not wanting to ignore that, but certainly being intentional, if anything else, about what academic programming should go into school, and being principals that were there from the surrounding schools, Wilburn, Walnut Creek, Barwell Road, all I think would have some tremendous insights into that, and that they would have students that would be into those schools. So I supported it, thought that was a good idea and worthy of bringing to the table.
Proactive, not reactive.
So a couple of things that I can tell you that staff is already working on. There are not plans to have Rogers Lane start as a member of the elementary support model group. That group is a cohort group that's sort of moving through. And the work that we're doing to assess the impact of some of those changes, they need to stay as a cohort for the time being. That being said, we want to learn from the support that we have provided, the additional resources or flexibility that elementary support model schools have had, so that when we open the school where there is a need that has been demonstrated, that we open with that resource. It will likely be a Title I school, so that'll be a place where some of the resources will come from. Another request that we've facilitated is to bring the principal in earlier than usual, so that that principal can do some of the work with the feeder schools and the principals at the feeder schools to identify families and go ahead and start building community around that school. We're working really hard around it, knowing that we need to bring in a strong principal to lead that community from the get-go. We have looked at whether you call it programming or a philosophy around how we open the school, that there be pieces that are intentionally put in place around that as well. For the academic programming, learning and teaching, for the pieces around the social emotional well-being of students and the other components of learning and teaching that we've talked about. But what I have said to Edward McFarland, who is the area superintendent for Rogers Lane, is that we need to provide for the board shortly after a principal is named an update on what that looks like. After the principal has a little bit of time perhaps to speak to some of his or her colleagues from the feeder schools and get some information and start framing out what that might look like. So we have done some work already to try to prepare for that, and are certainly willing to listen to any suggestions or ideas you may have about what you'd like to see.
Additional questions, comments? Keith?
One that was a thought or suggestion was one that would have a focus on literacy. I'm thinking about the Literacy Collaborative. That's a school literacy program, some sort of program in that's focused on literacy, or sort of literacy infused program that's sort of like our dual immersion programs where there's a focus on literacies, or even if you're working in math or science, there's a component that still focuses on reading and literacy. So I know there might be a few examples out there that we might be able to take a look at, or follow us, the Literacy Collaborative being one of them. But I think having the information that we have and the data we already have before us, particularly on reading and literacy and being in elementary school and that sort of thing, that's one that certainly makes a lot of sense.
Christine?
Well, I think in some of our newer schools, they've had, I guess, an ability to open the school with the kind of culture we're trying to build through our strategic plan. So I would hope that that's something we can see how that works in Rogers Lane, and then going forward, what kind of promise that holds as we infuse that and change our culture. That makes sense. That's exciting.
Just very quick, was the resolution just basically this statement, or was there more content to the resolution?
It was just that statement.
It was just a statement, okay, yeah, because if there's more, I'd like to see a copy of it, but it's fine.
Anybody else? Well, like I said, y'all have enough for a homework assignment?
I think we do.
So we could come up with more.
So we have
before you go into the timeline,
Okay.
I would like to thank the board members for coming in and sharing the questions and that they would like to have. I hope what this is showing parents is that we do understand the disruption to families when we force them to move schools. And we want to be very meticulous and make sure that we have considered all the options that we can think of, and hopefully come up with a logical and reasonable solution to meet the needs of these families, to meet the needs of having schools that are not overcrowded and that's long-lasting, so that we're not constantly moving families around as new schools open in their areas. So thank you all for bearing with us, and we look forward to hearing the information November 1st, I guess.
So as we look at what's in the timeline, we've gone through October 18th. The only thing left is for staff to present draft 3, to schedule a public hearing, and then use the work sessions that are available for board approval of the plan. We're still shooting for early December for board approval of the plan, so we've got our work cut out over the next 6 weeks to bring together both the answers to the questions that you've asked so that we can be responsive to the questions that have been raised in the community and by the board members, and incorporate that into how we present draft 3. And whether it's, we have November 1st and November 15th to do that, so we're going to go back to work and see where that takes us.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Time to swing.
Just a swinging.
Can you sing us a tune to swing by, Bill?
I don't know, there's an old country song that's got basically that in it. My nephew used to sing it all the time, and I don't know that I know the words, but it's just a swinging.
That's all I can remember. I think I heard it. He said, I was like, oh, yeah. That's the tune I remember.
Just a swinging. It's a swinging, yeah.
I thought we did the bulk of this work in facilities. This should take like 10 minutes.
No, this should be very quick. Hi, Joe.
Don't make me lift this again.
Well, good afternoon.
Hey, hey.
Last month, we brought a schematic design for style to the board for approval, and at that meeting, the board asked that the facilities committee take another look at the swing space options that are in the capital improvement plan. So last week, the facilities committee met. We took a look at those options. What you will find in the agenda attached is an analysis, a spreadsheet that showed 7 different options that were looked at, and information that was put in for each one of those options. We presented 5 of those to the facilities committee, and I think gracefully for everybody here, the facilities committee has kind of reduced that down to 2 options. So I would like to take a little bit of time to take you through a little bit of the information that led up to those, and then talk about the options. What staff is requesting today is guidance from the board on which option they would like the staff to proceed with. So with that,
We hid the good one.
there we go. I just had it turned off. Let's start with the original plan, or the current plan. As you see, this chart shows you swing sites on the left. It shows you the years across the top and the projects. Stowell Elementary's renovation is scheduled to occur during the calendar summer of 2018 through the summer of 2019. During that time, the current plan shows Stowell as swinging to Spring Forest modulars. After Stowell is finished, Northridge would then come into Spring Forest during its renovation in 1920, and then Conn would follow in 2021. In 1819, we have the construction of a new elementary school, E24, that is occurring on Strickland Road near Bailiwick. That construction would be complete for the 1920 school year. At that time, the plan was that York would move into that for swing space during the York renovation, and then open up as a new elementary school the following year. And then for Wiley, it's currently scheduled for its renovation in the 1819 time frame, and the current plan has Wiley located in the Garner 9th grade center. Garner would be opened back up just before that, and so that facility would become available for use. After the Wiley use, it is identified for a SNAP project or professional development, future use. So we went back and staff put together the information about swing locations, and they kind of fall in different categories. The first category are those that are owned by the school system, that are available at the time frame they're needed, or that we'll open them shortly in the near future, like future construction. And again, examples are the Spring Forest Modular, Garner Ninth Grade Center, E24, you saw all of those on the previous slide. Another one that's added on here is that since we laid out the capital improvement plan, we have put a site at 1820 Capitol Boulevard under contract. It's in due diligence, so it's another option that's out there that could be considered.
And that's the Bobby Murray.
That's the Bobby Murray Sherwood. Another category, this kind of came as a result of feedback from the community, identifying maybe some options out there. If you think each one of these schools are on the list for a major renovation, and so each one of these schools will be swinging out of their school for a time period. So the thought that was expressed was that maybe, for example, while Brooks renovation is completed, that school could then in turn be used as a swing space for one of the other renovations, which would result in extending the amount of time that school is swinging at a alternate location. That could be applied to Brooks, Stowell, Conn, Wiley, York, any of those locations. Now, as the facilities committee discussed this particular category, they were not interested in pursuing that any further, so that was not one of them that you will see at the end of this. Another one, potential swing space sites if available for lease. Again, this is going and trying to find a site that is not currently owned by the school system, but is available to maybe potentially lease. Examples, vacant land, churches, retail, office buildings. The biggest issue here turns out to be, first of all, availability. All right, whether they're even available out there, there's some potential, but at this time it's unclear whether they would be. The timing, once they're available, the timing it would take to get them in a renovation or add what is needed to convert them into a school, and how long they would be available during that time period. The acquisition process plays in this too, how long it takes to acquire or lease or go through the approval process, and then finally cost, of course. And you'll find that this is a high cost item. One example that was used, it was vacant land and going out and acquiring the temporary modulars and installing them, and a rough estimate for that was around $15 million. So if you wanted to do something like that, you would be looking at hopefully using it for multiple schools, like we've done with Spring Forest. That's been used multiple times. Again, this did not play out to be a viable option, and the facilities committee did not recommend any options that included this to come forward. And then one last category was also another kind of feedback from the community or possibility from other sources, was to reassign school membership to surrounding schools during the renovation. So for an example, while York is being renovated, you actually take all the students for that period of the renovation and assign them to schools in the neighboring area as close as possible for a year, and then you would be bringing them back to the school once it was renovated and complete. Needless to say, this one did not go very far either.
Because we asked, had it ever been done, and you said, no, we've never done that before, so that's a good reason.
Probably for good cause.
There's probably good reasons why not to ever
Well, it
do that.
actually would be Stowell that would have that, not York.
Yeah, I was just using an example.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be Stowell that would keep everything on the calendar, because York would have E24. And with magnet program and all kinds of things at Stowell, it was.
We said no.
Just said,
And staff.
This slide is to kind of help show the distance in the current plan now to a swing space. For example, North Ridge is located right in the center of this circle. The edge of the circle is at Spring Forest, which is the current plan. And so that kind of shows you the distance, if you put it in a circle, that it would take to find a swing space. We did this for each one of the locations as an attempt to find new options that were closer in. So basically, we were targeting to move the options for each one of these schools within a circle. Where the circles overlap are potential areas where the options could be used several times for multiple schools, depending on the type. As you see here, Style has the biggest circle, and in the current plan has the longest distance to travel for swing space.
We also wanted to bring up, as we did at facilities last week, transportation implications, because we understand that many of you, as well as parents and others, do have concern about potential changes in transport times from their base school to whatever their swing space is going to be. So that being said, limiting the distance of the school that's being renovated to the swing space will mitigate the change in commute time for many students. But students, on the other hand, are coming from all directions, and they're coming in different formats. Base students at some of these schools, the 5 schools we're going to look at, are currently walking to school. They would not be able to walk to a swing space school, perhaps. Other students are magnet students with neighborhood stops. Other students are carpooled, express stops, parent-provided transportation, and it's complicated. And I think we think a picture will better demonstrate that. So as Joe proceeds through each of the 5 school slides, we'll show you what the distribution of students looks like throughout the county for each of the schools, and get a sense of what the implication will be for transport time from their base school and then changing to the different swing options.
With that, we'll start with Northridge, which had, of course, the closest one. In these slides, what we will show you is the base assignment area for here, for Northridge, is these 2 locations. And on this map for Northridge, we show you the other students that are assigned to the school that provide their own transportation to the school. On here, we show Spring Forest. That is the current swing space location that was in the plan, that is in the plan for Northridge. After a review of the area, we were unable to find anything that was any closer. There were, a couple of other schools, a couple of like for example, just for one, the E24, to consider it, actually was further away than Spring Forest. So that really boiled down to Spring Forest was the closest option for Northridge at this time.
And then looking at it from a transportation perspective, again, relatively proximate. The 2 base areas, that's 1 base area for the school. The second separate base area is down here, and actually that separate area will be a closer drive to the swing space than it is right now to Northridge. All these other dots that are not a part of the 2 base areas, there are 33 choice plan students included within that. They receive transportation. We don't have a breakdown of which of those dots are the actual choice plan students, but one might presume that with 33 of them that they're distributed out there, so some will have a shorter commute, others will have potentially a longer commute, and then the rest, 97 of those, are transfer students. And again, that's going to fall in the same category. Some of those parents will have a shorter commute to the swing space, some will have a longer commute.
So, when the committee, of course, saw this, basically what came out of the discussion was to stay with the current recommendation of Spring Forest. For Style Elementary School, as you see here, York Elementary School, you see this is the base assignment area. And again, we show the distribution of other students involved that attend the school, that provide their own transportation. The options that were, the current option for York is E24, which is located up here and is actually close to some of the base students as they're currently assigned. And then one other option that was identified was Style, but again, this was the swinging for an extra year, which was dropped by the committee They weren't interested in that.
And again, as you look at the dots outside of the base assignment areas, none of those are choice plan parents or students, I should say, and 108 of them are transfer students. So again, depending on the choice students do receive transportation, the transfers, if we can accommodate them, we will. But again, depending on where you live, and again, we're not really offering a choice here or recommending a choice, one of the different options would be closer than the other.
So committee discussion, use current site at E24 or Style. Of course, as we already said, using the renovated Style would require Style to stay 2 years in their swing site. Potentially, in that discussion, what came up with some of the York students will be permanently assigned to E24 when it opens after York leaves. So the preference that came out of the committee meeting was using the current site of E24. Style now. In this map, here's the base area as shown before. What is new on here is, for example, you see the base also for Wiley. That is because Style is the overflow location for Wiley. There's only one student reflected here. And then the slide, the orange slide, slashes are the express busing for the magnet application program. The current plan, as we've discussed for Style, is Spring Forest, which is located here. The other options that were talked about were York, which is, again, that's extending the swing space for York, or E24, located at this location.
And again, looking at the entire county now, this is that area that is the magnet attendance area, and transportation is provided with express busing. And you can see the number out there. The actual base for Style is right there. And the rest of the county, which is goldish brown slashes, those are a combination of choice plan, transfer students, and magnet students without transportation. So again, as you look back at one option being E24, another option being Spring Forest, while the base assignment area is more proximate to E24, as it relates to these other parents, it depends on which parent you're looking at.
The question there again, use the current site at Spring Forest or E24 or York. Out of the 5 projects, Style at Spring Forest has the longest distance to travel for a swing site, and that's basically kind of what was the driver for this whole discussion to review. Using the renovated York, again, would require York to stay in their swing space for 2 years. The preference that came out of the committee was to use E24 for Style. Next location is Conn Elementary School. Similar layout as the other last one. For Conn, the current plan is Spring Forest, located here. The option that was out there was the Capitol Boulevard site that we mentioned a while ago.
And again, looking at the entire county, and these 2 golden areas, 3 golden areas, actually there's a little one there, 4, appear as purple on this map. Those are magnet draw areas, and those magnet draw areas have neighborhood busing associated with them. The rest of the county has express busing for parents, and again, depending on where you happen to reside, one option is closer than the other and vice versa. And there are also 37 choice plan students and 70 transfer students included within that distribution, and 216 magnet students that do receive transportation.
Just clarity, the elementary choice students this coming year will have 5th graders, be the last year of their choice?
Yes. Well, next year, to be clear, 2017-18 will be the final year that we have grandfather choice students. The board, we have discussed this, and it will be perhaps a decision the board will need to make. What will the decision be if there is a student next year that is retained in the 5th grade?
Okay, but so And this move is not anticipated for 3 years, so the choice students wouldn't be
Drop out.
displaced by this swing move.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, for con, use current site at Spring Forest or Capitol Boulevard. Most of the discussion centered around using Capitol Boulevard is closer than Spring Forest, but that does result in the high school opening a year later. Using Spring Forest provides, if you continue to use Spring Forest, when you start looking at the overall plan, it provides an opportunity to accelerate the con renovation actually by 1 year and have it accomplished sooner. The preference that came out of the committee was to leave it at the current location of Spring Forest.
And it'll be moved up.
And it would be moved up. Wiley Elementary School. Wiley's base. The current plan has Wiley at the Garner Ninth Grade Center. Options considered were Con Elementary School, but that extends Con's Swinga next year, or the Capitol Boulevard site.
And again, expanding that to the county, those gold areas that in turn on this map are purple, those are magnet draw areas with neighborhood transportation provided. And then the rest of the county that's not purple and not base is parent provided magnet transportation. And in addition, there are 7 choice plan students, 30 transfer students, and 73 magnet students with parent-provided transportation in that. And Mr. Fletcher, back to your question on the prior slide, on the choice assignment aging out, the same might be true of some of these transfer students that are in the 4th, 5th grade. This just we gathered the population at the time.
Sure, I understand.
So the discussion for this one focused, of course, about use current site at Garner Ninth or Capitol Boulevard. Using the Garner Ninth will require shopping center owners and tenants' approval for the change of use and a common area impacts for the operating easement agreement. That the last time this process was an extended process, and so again, the timing of that and even the acceptance of the changes is up for a possible question yet. I think the committee asked Betty to see if she could be able to check into it. I don't think she's had time yet, have you?
They haven't responded yet.
Yeah, okay. As for the playground program space at that location, if you put Wiley there are limitations to playground options because you've got just strictly concrete all around the building and on-site circulation space. One thing that really wasn't discussed at the meeting, but we wanted to bring up is that this, just a reminder, this is kind of an open site for pedestrian traffic and actually vehicular traffic through that area that is going to the shopping center. So you wouldn't be able to close it off. Using Capitol Boulevard site, it is closer than the Garner Ninth Grade Center. It does mean that the Wiley project would be 2 years later to start. The conversion costs and the timing are subject to unknown high school plans at this time. All I'm trying to say there is we would go in and design the high school knowing that we were going to put an elementary school in there so that would help with some of the costs. But right now we don't know the extent of what exactly is going into high school and how much it would take to convert it back. So the question comes if a summer is enough time to convert it back to the high school for the following year after Wiley leaves. We just want to say that that's a question mark out there. So the high school capacity could be another year later. And this just says that the project priorities, just a reminder, Wiley, it was earlier in the capital improvement plan because that was the timing of the swing space. Garner Ninth Grade was going to be available at that time. So Wiley was moved up earlier, but based on the priorities, it probably would have been later in the program if a swing space would have been available at that time. Committee didn't really have a preference or didn't settle on a preference on that one. What we ended up doing is they recommended 2 options for you today. And really, the only difference between those two options is the decision about Wiley Elementary School. But what you will find are some common trends. Stow and York are 1 year later in these options. Northridge and Conn are 1 year earlier. E24 and the high school capacities could be 1 or 2 years later, depending on the plan that's used. And Wiley is 2 years later in its renovation. And we already talked about the program. So this is a chart showing the two options that came out of the meeting. Again, I will show you the Stow. Basically, is a driver here. It's 1 year later. It goes into E24, which was the location for York. So York is 1 year later. That frees up Spring Forest so that Northridge and Conn could now move up 1 year each. This plan reflects Wiley, located at 1820 Capitol Boulevard. And the question marks here just reflect what I talked about earlier about the high school, new high school capacity. In this option, it provides a closer swing space for Stow and Wiley. And there is a very rough estimate of about $1.9 million cost with this for the inflation and the conversions that would be needed to implement this plan.
You say Stow and Wiley, but we're only talking about this potentially for Wiley, right? It would be closer for Stow, but we're putting Stow in E24.
That's what I said, did I? I'm sorry if I said otherwise.
No, your text says closer swing space for Stow and Wiley.
Yes,
Yeah, 'cause
Stow and
E24
E24 is a closer swing
Got-
space.
Okay. Yep.
He's with us.
1820. With you?
All right.
Too literal.
Want another one?
Yeah, give me a second.
All right, in option 7, you will notice that really for 4 of the projects, it is the same. The only difference is Wiley at the Garner Ninth Grade Center.
And the high school certainty available in 2021.
Right, right.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
But we have several board members who are convinced that your crack facilities team can make it happen on either plan.
I agree with the crack facilities team.
I'm 34 years in, I'm not worried. But you know, the.
Sherry said she won't be here.
Do we need more detail on the costs, given that in option 2, the Garner Ninth Grade Center is not calculated as to what will we do with what happens to the Garner Ninth Grade Center is not used as swing space for Wiley? Do we need to, is that need to be part of the calculus of option 2? And then for option 7, do we need to have as part of that calculus what will happen to 1820, given that it will be a high school sooner? And so, do you see what I'm saying? So we can really compare apples to apples. Should
Let
we
me-
have a line in there for Garner Ninth and 1820 in each of those options? Because it's all they're all linked.
The 1.9 million is an overestimate, the 200,000 is an underestimate.
Joe, let me ask a question. The 1.9 million
Right.
for inflation, is that because you're pushing projects out?
It's both, yes.
Stow and Wiley are a year later.
Yes.
I
Do
mean,
you
Stow and
know
York
of
are
that
a year later.
1.9, how much of that is inflation?
Should be a wash. They're all linked.
1.4 is inflation, 500,000 was conversion.
And when you say conversion, Alex, what are you referring to conversion? Is that for the
Converting
high school?
to high school in Wiley, that combination.
There's an estimate of about 500,000 to convert to high school right now. And the inflation 1.4 is a net, because what you do is you move these up. So the inflation that was originally in those projects is now not needed. And now you've added inflation to these projects. So it's a net inflation increase.
And I would just, perhaps, to put this in perspective, not that $200,000 of savings or an increase of 1.9 million are minor numbers, but this is a part of a close to $1 billion program, to just put it in context.
Just, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think I am, that all of this has an exterior constraint of maintaining a cash flow that meets the county's expectation. which is somewhere between $300 and $350 million a year. And also helps the county and assures that we all support the maintenance of a AAA bond rating from the 3 rating agencies. So these changes would be consistent with that overall arching requirement from the county in terms of the fiscal management of the project.
Correct.
So, how far off does Wiley have to be pushed to free up Spring Forest as its swing space? I'm assuming it can't swing in the Spring Forest early on because you've got schools. And how long would you have to push Wiley off to use Spring Forest?
It could swing to Spring Forest in 2021 instead of 1820 Capitol.
Same time. Why would we not do that?
It's really far distance. It's very far. And Wiley has a lot of magnet parents without transportation. I'm
Well, it's
assuming.
not as far as the ninth grade center.
No, it's close.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
is.
it is.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be.
I was trying to tell from the maps.
Well, here's Wiley. Unfortunately, both are not on the same map, on any of these maps, but here's Wiley, and there's the Spring Forest location.
And Capitol is,
And the Garner Center, he's wanting to know where the Garner, can you point to the Garner Center on that inset map?
Yeah, like right there.
I mean,
Okay.
it's right. yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
It's just the direction you would take it.
And there's a lot of Wiley parents without magnet transportation, who take their kids to school, and Wiley's very close to downtown, too. And NC State.
Getting to Garner would get us much quicker.
I mean, I feel like on this, until we know more about the ninth grade center option, it's hard to make a decision. It's sounding like that there's some pretty big questions as to whether that's even going to be viable. If it's not viable, then we're down to our choices. So I guess my question is, when do we need to make the decision by? I mean, I think we're in pretty much agreement for the Northridge, Con, Stow, and York. And so the question really is the Wiley issue. And so when do we need to make in the agreement?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Dean, but basically, we could proceed, basically, from what I'm hearing here, is we could start with the Northridge design. That is not started yet. So we could proceed with the Northridge design. And Betty can get to go through the pleasure of asking the questions to them, and everything would proceed as is, but there's a point in which we would want to stop the Wiley design. Because if you are going to be 2 years later, we don't want to go too far with that and still be able to, because later on, a couple of years later, there will probably be changes in code or traffic impact or whatever it is.
So that's my question. What is that date-ish? We need to start winding down.
I don't think there's,
We could pull the plug anytime.
I don't think there's a reasonable amount of time to get the final answers that you need before starting Wiley's design. If you're trying to hit the 18-19 year, you would have to, as Alex said, begin the design now and risk it stopping and then waiting and restarting 2 years later with any other code changes that may come. So I think we're past the point to begin an approval process and timely get the approvals before you would at least be down road design.
So from a dollar perspective, that needs to get added to the 200,000. In other words, these dollar figures are very squishy.
No, this already includes the design of Wiley, starting immediately.
It doesn't include a restart cost if it had to be.
That is correct.
So, I think Wiley's a separate issue. If we can agree on Spring Forest and E24, they're the same in either of these plans. So we're saying delay Stow and York a year in order to use E24, which is more proximate for both of those existing school campuses. All right, and we're going to be able, because of that, is consistent with the budgetary goals of the county, we can move the 2 renovation projects up 1 year to which should bring some glees of joy from the Northridge and Conner communities. So the unknown at this point, based on whether we can even modify the ninth grade center for any purpose, I presume, whether it's professional development or an elementary school,
Professional development was already, with the high school use followed by professional development.
was already
approved.
part of the approved plan. Okay, all
So
right.
then
So,
why was having Wiley be at the swing space in Garner what we were presented with months ago? If we didn't have the right, if that wasn't one, if that's not a live option? That's what I'm
Option to pursue.
confused about from the last committee meeting.
Well, it was about the only option other than Spring Forest. And again, as you were saying here, the question had not been asked yet, and still hasn't really been asked of them whether or not they would allow it.
so may I propose that we approve the top two lines of that chart, and we get staff to determine what the drop dead date is on Riley, and pursue what that swing space option is. None of us wants to spend money unwisely.
And bring that back to facilities.
And I understand,
Mr. Chairman, would that just be a consent item on a later meeting, or is that tonight in terms of taking action on it?
Is this a vote that needs to be taken, or is this a recommendation to staff? So I'm not sure, I'm not sure this needs a vote.
I'm not sure it needs to be able
I
to
think
be
it
there.
just
We're
needs
looking for
a-
guidance on proceeding. We've gotten part of that guidance with the Northridge. So the other issue
So
is.
you all don't think that a swing space decision is something that goes to the board for approval? I'm always just a little bit, when staff kind of makes, when people talk, and it's not always as clean as I would like when are you all not take this to the board?
Historically, it's been discussed, but I do not believe historically.
well,
the
it
board has
was a
taken
part of the
action.
précis for the approval of the schematic design, and it was removed from that board action. So maybe it does need to come on in 2 weeks. It shouldn't
Put as a
come tonight.
consent. Okay.
Could
That
we
would be my
consider,
preference.
do we have a facilities committee meeting between now and the next board meeting?
Well,
No.
not between now and the next
No.
board meeting.
Okay.
Next board meeting, November first.
The first, yeah. All right. So we're giving you
So,
the
Joe,
direction
can
to
you
move
move
forward,
forward?
but we'll officially okay it at the November 1st meeting on consent.
Thank you.
And we may have a better idea then.
Well, that's why I was
Ninth
sort of
grade
hoping
center
that
is
maybe
the
we could
current
do all
plan
of it
for
at the
Wiley
same time.
Swing Space. That's the current
We would
plan.
then also bring the contracts to be approved for those designs on the same board meeting.
Sounds good.
Is that correct?
Anything else?
Yes, I agree.
Do we want to take a break, or do we want to go into close and handle personnel?
I'm happy to go
Been at
into
this till
All right.
I think we- Right.
I'm not sure where staff is clear on the direction on Wiley.
The crack side,
The direction on Wiley.
bring back information.
What, the information about talking to the owners?
Ninth grade center.
Okay.
My sense is that if the Garner ninth grade center is viable, that is preferable. That's my sense.
That's what I was hearing.
Current plan.
I like board approval.
That's why you asked.
I don't know if we'll have the answer for
Right,
that in 2 weeks.
I know you don't have it.
I think,
You don't need it.
Why would we design a school to go into space we can't use? So, I mean, that is the resolution that we need to have. Are we gonna be able to use the space? And if so, let's spend the money to design it. And if we're not, then we gotta come up with plan B.
Perhaps I misspoke. That's not the design I meant. In order to begin designing the renovation for Wiley, we would have to begin the Wiley design.
For Wiley, not the swing space.
For Wiley, not the swing space.
Right.
The question is, if you begin designing Wiley's renovation
Now,
and find out that approval is not had for Garner, there's going to be a couple-year
delay.
delay. So your design would have to be tabled.
Okay, thank you for
That's some
clarifying
cost
that.
up until that point, So I think Joe's concern is, shall we begin with Wiley and risk the lack of success at Garner with the board's understanding that there will be some cost associated with stopping and restarting design and updating it? Or does the board want to wait until we get an answer on Garner before beginning anything? And if that's the case, I agree with Joe, I don't think we'll know in 2 weeks. Is that what you?
That's correct.
secretly measure?
Well, we've already started it, that we have.
So can I make sure we're on the same page? We plan to bring to your next board meeting, and ask you to take, we'll put it on consent, the decision about Northridge, Conan, Stow, and York as far as swing space location. And we'll also have design contracts for
Northridge and Wiley.
The existing Wiley campus.
The existing Wiley campus. Yes.
And that, depending on when we do have information from the ninth grade center about whether or not it's a viable option and how far along the Wiley design we are, we may have to pause that.
Okay.
And it would force you to
That
option
makes
two.
sense.
So
Okay.
it's not
Yeah,
consent,
that-
and-
that
and
makes
if
sense.
It's
they
not
get
unlike
forced
what we got at
option
Stow and York. We're adding a year to those timelines.
And it's happened before, yes.
It has.
It's happened before. Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Needham.
Thank you. There is clarity.
Okay. Quick break, and then we'll start our regular meeting at 5:30.